This is the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm political analyst Al Spry. It's great to be here with you, of course, Reagan, and we have a special guest in today's studio.
It is always a pleasure, Al. And yes, as we mentioned just a moment or two ago, we are delighted to have here in the Florida Roundtable Castle with us today, John Morgan. John, the head honcho, senior partner, Morgan and Morgan. Need I say any more? John, welcome to the Florida Roundtable.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's been many, many years that you and I have sort of been acquainted. And
you look the same, though. Whatever you're drinking, I want some of it.
He's so nice.
Can I say the line? Can I, John?
Please.
For the people.
There you go.
Right.
All right.
Offices all over the place now. You turn around and you're all in different states now and everything.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we are delighted to have you with us today, and of course, you are involved in a campaign at this point. You're the principal mover of the medical marijuana issue, and I guess so. Our starting point would have to be your motivation in starting this, and why the issue, and why now.
Well, we all have limited resources to do with what we can with our money, and sometimes I've used it for other projects and other charities. But I see this as a philanthropic issue, not so much political. And I believe if we can change the law in Florida, that hundreds of thousands of people will benefit day one, and millions of people will benefit days 2, 3, 4, and forever. So for me, it's like, where can I put my money? I don't have Bill Gates' money. Where can I put my money and make a big difference in people's lives? And so this is what I decided to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, my understanding of it is that you have a very personal background with this issue.
That's true, because I saw it work for my father, who had esophageal cancer and COPD and died, but used it at the end of his life. He's a real anti-drug guy, and but gave him real relief and peace and tranquility. And my brother Tim, who works with me for the last 20-something years, is a quadriplegic, and those injuries bring on terrible phantom pain and terrible spasms. He's prescribed, almost, bottles of horse tranquilizers to help him, but they don't help him. But marijuana does. Mm-hmm. So I've seen it twice in my own family. I'm not a doctor. I don't understand why it works. I just know it does.
What was your opinion before you had to deal with the issues with your dad and brother about marijuana, medical marijuana?
Never thought about it. Never. I thought, it's not my issue. It's not me. It's not my thing. So I never thought about it until it happened to my father, 20 years ago, when I saw this guy who was being given a cocktail of narcotics, and hallucinating half the time, and rolled up in fetal position and couldn't eat. And he got marijuana and walked in, and he's sitting there eating a pot roast and drinking a Miller Lite. We're like, my God, it works.
You mean you saw instant transformation is what you're saying?
Day one. That night, he said, I'm going to try it. Dolores, who was our caretaker for him, made this pot roast. I walked in the place. He's sitting up. He's eating the food. I was always amused that there was a Miller Lite there next to his, and he was, happy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so it was like day one, and he used it for the rest of his life, as such as it was.
Why do you think there's so much pushback on this issue? You have so many politicians, mostly what I see are the GOP, pushing back on this, especially up in Tallahassee. What do you think that is? Is that purely politics, or?
I think it's politics, and I don't think they didn't think it through. If they thought it through, their base is really older white people, men and women, but older people are the ones that need it the most, and so I think it's been a miscalculation on their part. And I think if they could put the genie back in the bottle, they may just say, you know what, let's let the voters decide. If the voters want it, that's what democracy is all about. Why are we so much smarter than everybody else? And so I think our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who's a great friend of mine, and I've partied with her many times at Gasparilla and had a lot of good times with her, I'm sure she's happy with me talking about that. But I think
there's nothing wrong with partying.
No,
nothing wrong with
and there was no marijuana, by the way. It was only Jack Daniels.
Well, I tell you what, we'll take a pause along the network line here, and then we'll continue our conversation with John Morgan. This is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Stay put. The conversation continues following these messages. We're back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And our very special guest this day in studios, Mr. John Morgan, the John Morgan Esquire, senior partner, Morgan & Morgan for the people. You know him from radio, from television, all over this state. And John, it really is it's a privilege to have you in the studio with us today, and we're glad you're here.
Thank you very much.
You made an interesting comment before the show saying that your wife, who you don't disagree with on most political issues, has a different opinion about the medical marijuana. Tell us about that.
Well, my wife, who I do disagree with almost every political position, one time I think her life's goal is to cancel out every vote that I ever make. I think one election day I got up and my tire was flat, and I actually thought she may have been the person that did that. But she's a pretty conservative Republican, and but on this issue, because we're using our joint money to promote it, we spent some time talking about it and thinking about it. And she said, I can, as a kind of a live and let live conservative Republican, and, she couldn't find a reason to be against it, which is rare in our house to agree on something politically.
Well, now, this is obviously there's a large organization, People United. How did they precede your work with this, or did
there was a group that preceded me called Puff'em, mm-hmm. And when I got involved, I said that's a bad name. It's not that it's. I felt like it was going to be Cheech and John with Puff'em stickers all over.
Yeah.
So,
it doesn't give the right image.
No. So we have to. So we changed it to United for Care. .org is where the website is, and so they had done a lot of work in the beginning, but had really gotten no traction, and didn't have any financial resources, and but great people and who believe and want to help. So I got involved late or early this year. So I'm Johnny. Excuse the pun. I'm a Johnny come lately to the party.
Well, now, a couple of things going on. In order to get this to the ballot, you have to have a huge number of signatures to this amendment. Is it over 700,000?
Right at 700,000, and you really have to collect 1 million because probably 25% turn out to be invalid or duplicates, and so it's going to be very, very close. We got about 20 days to get it done.
I was going to say there's a time frame on this too, that if you don't have it in and validated by a certain point, then they just say,
it doesn't happen.
You're off to next year
till 2016. So
2 years.
It's going to be very close. Yeah. Like I said, I didn't start this thing. I didn't get involved until summer. Usually people are up and going for 2 years with these things. Mm-hmm. But I think we're going to collect 80,000 signatures this week. And we're out there, and I've got a big paid group, and I've got a bunch of volunteers. And, if people out there that are listening care about it, the best way you can help is go up and down your street and get some signatures.
How did you, you're saying you got involved this summer. What really spurred you to do that?
What spurred me was I got a call from a guy who was a kind of a political person who'd been involved in politics, and I knew him, and he had a recent poll that he showed me, and he said, I think the people of Florida may be ready for this, but we need somebody that's going to be able to help us financially. And I met with him and started thinking about it, and I thought, you know what? You can know and sit still and do nothing, or you can know and not sit still, and so I jumped into it.
Are you able to disclose who that is?
Ben Polera. Polera, he did work with Hillary's campaign and with Bill Nelson, so he's a guy in Florida that I knew. And Dave Beatty had done the polling, and so I respected Beatty's poll as being something that was valid, and it's found that 60-something% of the people in the most recent poll had 82% of Floridians support it. So I don't think that's necessarily true, but it's encouraging.
According to this website, it says you're about 70%. 7 out of 10 voters surveyed support medical marijuana in Florida. That's huge. That means if this gets on the ballot, it will pass. It's just a question of getting it on the ballot.
That's right. If this gets on the ballot, and it will be one day, if it's not 2014, which it's going to be, if it gets on the ballot, it's going to pass because the people of Florida are smart. They've seen people like Sanjay Gupta, who 2 years ago was dead set against it, but said, you know what, I got to look at the science. I got to read. I've got to be open-minded. And he did a thing for CNN recently called Weed, a 60-minute special. He says, you know what, I was wrong. We need this for all sorts of reasons. Children with epilepsy who are locked in their bodies. And all of a sudden in California and Colorado, these children are riding tricycles and bicycles, and they know they're children. I mean, there's people with ALS who are heads on pillows at the end of their life who can get no relief, but they can now. So as people decide to not just shut it down with the first word marijuana, but say, you know what, I'm okay with listening to science. I'm okay to listening, and I can be, and I think libertarians, for God's sake, when Bud Hediger and I are agreeing on something, that they're pigs are flying by here in
exactly, and Bud has come out for this.
Exactly.
So
I had to rethink my position. I had to rethink my position when I heard that. I was like, "What's the trick here?" But anyway.
Well, let me backtrack for just a minute because of some of the numbers. I had a thought here that I want to ask you about. With a poll showing a 72% approval rating. Of course, those folks don't necessarily all vote or everything, but I'm presuming that this is one of those constitutional amendments that is going to require the supermajority. We don't, 50% plus one is no longer enough to get a constitutional amendment in Florida. So if you're going to have 60% or 66% or 60%, that would mean that there would probably still have to be a fairly active campaign even once it is on the ballot.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I think that we'll have to, and we have a campaign in mind that we think will be very effective and similar to the smoking campaigns, the anti-smoking campaigns, where you'll have patients who could benefit, talking about the benefits and people who have benefited in other states. But, 60% is not easy to get in any election.
Right.
You never see, except when Putin runs for re-election. That's it's a good 96% or something like that.
Yeah.
Or the Ayatollah.
Maybe we can get Putin over here to drum up the the votes for or Kennedy in 1960. So. But let me ask you this: besides Pam Bondi, who's a friend of yours, who are some of your biggest opponents on this? Who are you facing some?
Well, I'm facing
opposition from.
Evidently the Speaker of the House, Will Weatherford, is against it, and Don Gates, the President of the Senate, is against it, and some sheriffs are against it.
And do they give you reasons why?
It's all, I don't understand what their reasons are. It's a gateway drug. It's going to be hard to enforce, and it's just, to me, it's just rhetoric. It doesn't make any sense for me. To me, I think it's political, not really thought out. And I believe that you're going to start seeing a lot of these people reverse position and say, you know what? I mean, the sad part about it is the reason this has had to happen is in Tallahassee, a bill was filed by a senator and a representative, but they wouldn't even hear testimony. They wouldn't even let the doctors come and testify. They wouldn't let the patients testify. They didn't even. They said, "Look, we don't want to hear it."
Mm-hmm. They just want to shut it down.
They just want to shut it down. It's like, well, how do we live in a democracy where we're saying we don't even want to hear? We don't even want Sanjay Gupta to come here and explain why he reversed his position. We don't even want to hear that. Why don't you? Because we don't. Because we know what's good for you. because, we're, funeral directors and insurance salesmen up here in Tallahassee really not doing the people's work. And so the sad thing is the reason I'm doing this is because they wouldn't do that, which was just take testimony, listen, learn, vote. And I think the problem with these guys and gals, and we see it nationally, all of us, both parties, is that they're more concerned about the next election than their next door neighbor. And so here I am.
Well, and you could take this all the way back to Nixon and the war on drugs, which at the time was the war on hippies, I guess, in a way, because they made marijuana the equivalent of cocaine and heroin and all these destructive drugs. And I think there's still that political involvement.
I think
with that.
The guy next to me might be an old hippie. He's got earrings. I don't know. It doesn't look like a hippie, but he may have been one once upon a time.
We were there.
The Chartreuse minibus.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it's this whole deal. It's this war on drugs, and the real war on drugs should be the war on pill mills in Florida, and the war on OxyContin, and the war on this the prescription, the narcotics that we pump into our system, and these hot sales reps get paid to sell pills. Their bonuses are based on what doctors prescribe. Can you imagine the world we live in, that you hire these handsome men and good-looking girls, and you parade them into doctors' offices, and you take them out for wine and steaks, and you get your bonus based on how many pills the doctors prescribe. I mean, that is so wrong that you don't even need to debate it, do you?
It's legal drug pushing.
Exactly. And now we got a plant that was put into nature by God for us that's free. And we say no to that. And then we say, we know it works. And the reason we know it works is there's a little pill called Marinol that the pharmaceutical companies have been trying to harness forever to condense it, put it in the pill, but it doesn't work. They know marijuana works, but their answer is, let us figure this pill out, Marinol. Let us get it in a little capsule so that we can make billions and billions and billions of dollars instead of just putting in a little planter outside your back porch.
Well, they don't have a financial stake in that. That's why.
That's exactly right.
There's no financial stake.
And they're telling us, wait for us to figure it out. They don't know how to do it. They've been working on it for 34 years. They don't know how to do it.
I'm going to take 30 seconds here to go into retrograde here before we take a little bit of a pause. 1968. I thought about that. And we used to say that drugs were cheap and sex was free. And maybe that puts us into the Cheech and Chong mode. I don't know, but
well, what's the song say? Those were the days, my friend. I thought they'd never end.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to start playing some Beatles records over here in the background for you guys while you reminisce.
Yes. It is time for us to take a pause along the network line here. Let me remind you that this is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith,
and I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest in studio this day is John Morgan, Esquire. He is the head of Morgan & Morgan. We're talking about the medical marijuana issue, and our conversation continues following these messages. From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest in studio this day, John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan for the People. Principal sponsor, I don't think that's pretty much fair. Accurate, of this medical marijuana issue that you hope is headed for the ballot in November of 2014. So that folks understand, and we make a strong case for the use of marijuana in medical conditions and whatnot. So they sign the petition. We're going to get this on the ballot. Supposing that it were to pass, what is it proposing? How does this function as to working with medical marijuana, just as opposed to a young college student that just wants to get high?
Well, what would happen next is it would then go to the state legislature, and they would regulate it and license it. One of the misconceptions is that all of a sudden we're going to have, head shops popping up out of the 60s again, infinite mushroom coming back. But that's not the way it works. It will be regulated, tightly regulated. One of the things we found in our polling and focus groups is that people want the opposite of California. They do not want it to be as open as California. And the state of Florida would regulate how many, who, in our only doctors can prescribe it. In other states, psychologists can. Here has to be a medical doctor. So it's not going to be like all of a sudden you're going to have 10 stores on one street. It'll be licensed, regulated, and controlled by the state of Florida.
Mm-hmm. Years ago, as a kid growing up in Ohio, and this works, the state of Ohio had a monopoly over alcohol. If you wanted to buy a bottle of scotch, you had to go to a state-operated store. Are we talking about that much control, or?
I don't think so. I don't think the state wants to be in that business. And I have my home, summer homes in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. In New Hampshire, they still control the liquor. Yeah. What's interesting is all the liquor stores are on the highway. You pull in off the road and get yourself a bottle of vodka for the rest of the trip.
Do they have a drive-through window as well?
Well, that's in Kentucky, and where I'm from in Kentucky, you drive through and they make you a Jack Daniels and a splash, and they hand it through the window, and then you drive off. But that's why
I heard Tom and Jerry's used to be like that on 1792.
Yes. You get that and a hot dog. And he sold more hot dogs than anybody. What was his name? Penner's brother, but Tory. But no, it would not be like that. It would be there would be medical marijuana dispensaries. It'd be owned by private people, and most importantly, it would be taxed. Mm-hmm. It would be regulated. It would be an income producer for the state of Florida. There's so much good that comes out of not only the compassionate side, but if you look at the people in Colorado will tell you that the medical marijuana industry rejuvenated that economy. Mm-hmm. Real estate, business, taxes, the tax base that it brings. And, the big loser will be the people who sell it illegally. I guess the people who will be crying about it will be the Mexican cartels.
Well, it's and I think the opinion is more and more that it's really not much different than having a couple of beers. It's been demonized for so long, though, and because of for various reasons.
Nobody has ever overdosed on marijuana. People die every 19 seconds. Somebody dies in America from alcohol abuse. 16,000 people died this year from OxyContin. Hundreds of thousands are hooked and families ruined. Nobody has ever overdosed and died. Nobody's ever gotten a machine gun high and came in and started spraying up a bank. I mean, it's quite frankly just the opposite.
No, you usually just want some Cheetos or something.
Well, yeah, I told somebody, people may have almost laughed themselves to death, but they did not. They did not die.
I want to take this back to something that you said in the last segment, which was a lot of people think that just because a drug is legal, it's okay. So they're taking very, very hallucinogenic, harmful drugs, like you mentioned, OxyContin, deadly drugs, Vicodins, and taking all of these painkillers, and they figure, well, my doctor prescribed it, and it's legal, so it has to be safe, and I'm fine. And I think that the whole thing is all askew because the American people have been sold a bill of goods that because it's from a doctor and it's legal, that it's absolutely fine for you, and anything the government says is not fine for you is not fine for you and not legal. So I think we're in a trap there.
And that's a good point. And look, OxyContin, let's just talk about that before Vicodin or anything else. OxyContin is so addictive. Even the king of personal responsibility, Rush Limbaugh, he was prescribed OxyContin. He got hooked. He couldn't give it up. He had to start breaking the law to get it for himself. It bursted he can't hear anymore. He's got a cord coming out of his skull into his ear to hear because of OxyContin. And it's not that he's a bad person. It's just that it is so addictive that even he, who is ranting and raving on radio waves like this about personal responsibility and law and order, he couldn't help himself. It is a killer drug. And just because a doctor prescribes it doesn't mean that it's not a poison. I mean, we have a pharmaceutical industry that has a stranglehold on America. 7 of 8 commercials on the evening news are it's pharmaceuticals. We're basically self-prescribing. I mean, I don't know what restless leg is, but I see drugs for restless legs.
Sure.
I think that's when you don't move anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
you sit on your sofa and your legs start tingling because you're not moving.
Yeah, I don't know.
But let's take a pill for it, not get up and get some exercise.
Or
let's take a pill.
Irritable bowel, Viagra, sleeping. I mean, we want a pill. ADD drugs for children. We start to pump our children full of these pills, thinking a pill's going to make somebody sit down and behave. I mean, it's insane what we're prescribing to ourselves. We go to the doctor and we say, we want that pill for our child. Why? He's restless. He won't sit down. Let's give him a pill. And we put them into this state of a coma, and they go off to school or ADD or Adderall for attention. It's crazy.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: if we're going to have independent vendors who are supervised by the state, where does the product come from? How do we ensure quality control and that sort of thing?
The agriculture department would probably, Adam Putnam and his crew would probably be in charge of it. I mean, right down the street here, Apopka, you have some of the most, sophisticated greenhouses in the world. But it would be regulated by the state and by the ag department, and it would make sure that it's not laced. I mean, a lot of these things are laced with hallucinogenics, and so it would be very tightly regulated the way our food and water is.
I wanted to also ask you, we talked about your opponents. Who are some of the biggest supporters in the state right now? Some names we might know.
Charlie Crist is one. I think Nan Rich, who's running for the nomination. I think most politicians who I talk to privately are for it. George Soros and his organization has been helpful to me. So I think it's at the end of the day, it's almost everybody. It's just a matter of do you want to say it publicly.
So a lot of them are privately saying things.
Oh, they're saying it privately. They're saying it's going to pass, and Republican friends of mine are saying, I wish our leadership would just leave it alone because this is a dead dog loser for our party.
And when it comes down to the local sheriffs and that sort of thing, is it perhaps a fear of additional responsibility of enforcement and things like that? Or?
I think that's what they say. That the sheriffs are great people and providing unbelievable service, but I think they're scared of what they don't know. We're all fearful of what we don't know. I would tell them to look in Colorado, look what's going on in Colorado and Arizona, and they don't have anything to be scared about.
There is an additional question of federal overlap. How do we distinguish? And I think that is a problem that they've been confronted with in Colorado. The president has said, well, he would back off of the federal laws and whatnot. What kind of?
Well, that is. And look, one thing we all know that's listening here today. One thing we all know for a fact is that one day, every state in the union, there's going to be medical marijuana, whether it's today or tomorrow. We know that. The president, through Eric Holder, our attorney general, has said, I'm not going to prosecute because there is a federal law that says this is illegal. But what our attorney general has said to Colorado and to Arizona and to California is we're not going to prosecute. And so I think that is, that's the highest law enforcement in the land. And so that's why, marijuana is now this week legal in Colorado. Mm-hmm.
What is what are the amount of states that actually have this now? How many
20,
states?
20.
20, so almost half the country.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there is nothing really to stop this. This is gaining momentum tremendously then.
Listen, it's without opening up Pandora's box, it's just like gay marriage. It's going to be in every state. It's just a matter of when. People in America want us people out of our morals and out of our bedrooms and out of our lives. Let us take care of ourselves. Let us do what God gave us to do, which is this plant, our lives, our bodies. And the more and more people that think about it, the more people are going to be for all these issues. So it's not a matter of when. It's just a matter of, what date.
Mm-hmm. On that note, let us pause again along the network line. We'll remind folks that this is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest this day, John Morgan, the senior partner of Morgan & Morgan for the People. We are discussing the medical marijuana issue. And if you'll stay put, our conversation continues following these messages. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry. So glad to have this show on the Tough TV network across the country, on many fine affiliates. So we're on TV and radio pushing the message here.
Yeah. Our very special guest, John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan for the People, the medical marijuana issue, which you have been spearheading here. It has been before the Florida Supreme Court. You're in the process of coming down the home stretch and gathering signatures to put it on the 2014 ballot. Florida has a regulation, and one of the things that the Supreme Court is looking at is this notion of single issue for a constitutional amendment. And I thought maybe you could share with us the thought process and the work that went into the actual writing of this, as it would appear, and this is what the Florida Supreme Court has to look at.
Well, we've already been to the Florida Supreme Court, and the lawyer who drafted this for me is a friend of mine, John Mills. He was a former Speaker of the House. He's a constitutional law scholar. This can only be 75 words, so it's tight. And the single subject is, which is the reason will be kept off the ballot. And the single subject is really what is the impact this would have on the rest of the state economically. Surprisingly, when we went to argue at the Supreme Court a couple of weeks ago, the single subject was never mentioned in oral arguments. They were talking about, doctors going haywire, but they never talked once about the single subject rule, which is really the only thing that's going to keep it off the ballot. So I'm cautiously optimistic there.
Mm-hmm.
It says, according to this, the ballot language defines debilitating medical condition as diseases such as cancer, glaucoma, HIV, AIDS, hepatitis C, or other conditions for which a physician believes that the medical use of marijuana would likely outweigh the potential health risks for a patient.
Right. And I couldn't list them all because I don't know what they all are or what could be. And so one of the things that the opponents raised was they were concerned about the fact that a doctor could prescribe medical marijuana for a hangnail. And my response to that is, listen, if we have doctors who are doing that, then God help us all. If we can't trust our doctors, and then the other thing that I found very amusing from the Attorney General was the fact that doctors are given immunity for prescribing medical marijuana. And here's this Republican Attorney General going, and John Morgan wants to give doctors immunity. I'm like, yeah, and you don't? Is this ass backwards or what? I mean, I'm the boogeyman to the Florida Medical, and all of a sudden I'm saying they shouldn't be prosecuted or held civilly responsible. They're going, oh, but yes, they should.
I will say you've put your money where your mouth is. According to this report, you've put almost nearly $1 million into this effort. And
more than that now.
So, and of course, you have another donor here who's been mentioned, Barbara Stifel, who kicked in $100,000.
More than that now by her. She's been great.
And so, where do people find out more about doing this petition if they're interested in supporting this issue?
If you're interested, you could go to unitedforcare.org. That's our website. You can download the petition there. I would ask you to download 10 or 100 or 1,000 because it's going to be tight. If you've never done anything politically, this is the time to do it if you believe like I do, because there are a lot of people that are breaking the law, taking care of their families. There are a lot of people who are really, really sick, and this is a mission of mercy. And so I hope that time's running out, and I need people to go to unitedforcare.org and to help me.
How close are you? How many more do you need?
I think
approximately.
I'm going to be, I'm going to have over the question is, will I have enough? And I've been getting a lot of help from some supervisor of elections who are going to give me some time. I'm technically have to have it all there by January 5th, but I'm getting some relief from some of the big counties, and I want to thank those counties who are helping me.
Why do you think they're helping? They believe in this? Is that
they
what
believe
it is?
in it? And they believe that they believe in democracy.
Mm-hmm. It used to be easier to get a ballot on. They've made it incredibly more difficult now.
Exactly. I mean, you got to have 60%. You got to have these signatures, and it should be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Look, that's
true.
This is. I don't have a problem with it being difficult. This is our Constitution.
Right.
This is a big deal. And when we change the Constitution, it should be for a really big reason.
Yeah, not like pregnant pigs. I mean, Reagan and I always joke about the pregnant pig one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you look at that, you're like, what is this?
We had way too many proposed amendments that had nothing to do with statewide law.
Yeah. Just a couple of special interests, and people are just going, yes, no. They don't know.
And didn't even know what the
Didn't know what
was. Yeah. Probably not fair, but would you want to take a minute and kind of do us a little summary there before we have to run away?
Well, this is a mission of mercy, and I've tried to put together a band of angels, an army of angels, to help us pass this law. The state legislature wouldn't do it. They wouldn't even hear testimony. So we've had to take it to ourselves, take it to the people. An old 60s slogan that you may remember was, power to the people.
Absolutely.
And if ever there was a time to bring that phrase back, it's now. Power to the people. Go to unitedforcare.org, and let's do this for some really sick people.
unitedforcare.org. And besides the petition, all that information we've been talking about today, they can find all kinds of
all there, or
there.
you can visit, you can call or email me directly at johnmorgan@forthepeople.com, and I'll get right back with you.
Yeah. John Morgan, thank you so much for visiting with us this day. And as we go along here, we hope you'll come back and do an update with us as things go along. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Much.
We appreciate your time coming in.
Thank you very much.
This is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And Al and I will be back with a closing thought following these messages. This is the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks and of Tough TV. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry. So great to have John Morgan on. Special edition of Florida Roundtable on Tough TV and also on the Florida News Network.
I must say, I think now I have a better understanding of exactly what it is that they are looking for as they move forward with this medical marijuana issue. Something that somebody, for example, those of you who've been around for a while may remember. George Shultz served as Secretary of State in the Reagan administration, advocating the kinds of things that John Morgan is talking about. And one thing we didn't touch on, and that is, his notion with that is that it would unclog some of the court system from a lot of the cases that have bogged us down over the years.
Exactly. I think didn't even Nancy Reagan come in favor of it? I believe
she did.
So,
hey, happy holidays. We want to say thank you for spending this time with us. We know this is a very busy time of year, and we trust that you will be safe and sound as we head into this new period. Thank you for being with us this day. I'm Reagan Smith.
Happy holidays from both of us. I'm Al Spry.
And we will invite you to join us again 1 week hence on many of these same stations for the Florida Roundtable.
You've been listening to Florida Roundtable, a weekly look at issues and problems of concern to Floridians from a state, national, and international perspective. Presented by the Florida News Network with your hosts, Reagan Smith and Al Spry. The views and opinions expressed during the preceding program are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's ownership, management, or sponsors of FNN. Your views and opinions are welcome. Address your card or letter to Florida Roundtable in care of Reagan Smith, 2500 Maitland Center Parkway, Suite 407, Maitland, Florida, 32751. Or you may email reagansmith@fnnonline.com. Thank you for listening, and please join us again next week for another edition of Florida Roundtable.